So this mic isn't working for the space, but it's working for the camera. So just roll with me on that. But I'll be projecting, but that's why I'm holding it. I'm not just, doing like play microphone. It's doing something, just not for us in this room. So hi, I'm Ariana Prael. I am a culture reporter with KQED. I'm also a board member here at Gateway. And and so happy to be here to moderate today's conversation with these amazing educators. And I know there was some kind of titles listed, but I can read just a little bit of folks' background just to ground us in the space. So I will go down. So Laticia Erving is Special Assistant to the Superintendent of the San Francisco Unified School District and Interim Director of the African American Achievement and Leadership Initiative. And she is a native daughter of San Francisco, born and raised in the city's Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood, reared in relative foster care, learned at an early age about the value of a caring adult in a young person's life. Holds 22 years of experience in SFUSD, working to ensure voices of SFUSD families are elevated and recognized as essential assets to the forward movement of San Francisco's educational institutions. So welcome, Laticia. And we also have Roilyn Graves here with us, influencer, change agent, special education enthusiast, all phrases that are used to describe her. Over the last 20 years, she's been intentionally disrupting inequities within the educational system, and her specific title is Director of Special Education. That's correct. Welcome. Phung Lai is currently the Executive Director of Alternatives in Action, a charter school in East Oakland, California. And she's an educator and educational leader in the Bay Area for over 20 years, extensive experience, Oakland nonprofit organizations, AmeriCorps programs, multiple K-12 charter and district schools. And also served on leadership team for 3 charter schools as a mentor, coach, teacher, and school administrator, and much more. Phung Lai, welcome on the panel. And we also have Jeff Camarillo, who is currently the Assistant Director of Secondary Education at the Stanford Teacher Education Program, also known as STEP. And at STEP, Jeff is honored to bring his 20-plus years of experience teaching, leading, and serving in BIPOC-centered urban communities to preparing and guiding the next generation of teachers. And he's also been an assistant principal at the East Palo Alto Academy, a college prep charter school founded by Stanford's Graduate School of Education. You're currently there. No, that's what I thought, but it was just, sorry. All right, just wanted to double check that. Yes, in the past he's been, and then before leading and founding charter high schools throughout the Bay Area, was a middle and high school history teacher and coach in his father's hometown of Compton, California, in San Francisco, California. So welcome, Jeff. All right, so to just kind of get us into the space with this year's and this day's theme, we're going to start with kind of just an easier one to ease us in. What is grounding you and or empowering you during this school year right now? So what is a practice that you're doing that is helping you ground yourself this year? And so kind of thinking into your personal life and not necessarily, at the workspace, but what you're doing to kind of to ground your own life. Laticia, I'm going to start with you. We'll go down the line.
Good afternoon. So this is where I do not excel. And so this is probably not the right thing to say, but I think every educator in the room can probably say that we don't do enough for self and figuring out ways to ground ourselves. And so someone told me I was the master of do too much. And so I am mastering doing too much at work and not doing enough for self. But when I have the opportunity to do so, I'm in nature, I'm breathing, I am walking, I am hiking, I am just sitting and listening to the sounds. So that's where I feel closest to God and where my spirituality gets to be expressed. And so definitely I am grounding myself in nature, and I will do a better job in the coming days, not years.
Well, no, and we appreciate that honesty because it's real. It's real.
Yeah, I would say this year is a year that I've experienced a lot of growth in grounding myself and putting myself first. And the reason for that is after, 20 years of being in different places, most of my career started on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia and all those places. You learn how to work. You get really, really great at mastering what you're doing for other people and what you're doing for the kids and what you're doing for the families. And you just can't go to sleep at 2 a.m. because you have 3 more things to do. And this year that actually landed me on a medical leave. I'm probably my doctor says that I'm the only person to argue with her about going on a medical leave. But whatever, I just thought we should scaffold myself in. But it's fine, whatever. So she's great. I bought her a mug, but whatever. So I think one of the things that I've done since then is I have set boundaries that allow me to show up for me. And it's been really important. Every morning I wake up, I go for a walk. Most mornings I wake up and I go for a walk. And after I go for the walk, I come home, I find one of those 12-hour YouTube meditation videos, just music, and I listen to it for at least 10 minutes. I like to move a lot, so I can't sit there for hours, but the gist is that I'm calming my mind, I'm breathing, I'm praying, I'm doing whatever it is that I need to do to fuel me to take on everybody else's energy for the day. Because it's a lot. It's a lot to interact with 30, 40 different people in a day. And after that, I journal. And I do not start my day, most days, until I've done that. And that really does help me get started. It helps me say, today, I started by taking care of myself. It may mean that you have to wake up at 5. It may mean that you have to wake up at 6. It may mean that you stay up an extra 30 minutes. But when you put that time into you, you can show up so much better for other people. And so I tell the steppies all the time, I work with Jeff too at Stanford in the SET program. So I tell them all the time, you really have to do at least one thing for yourself. So we start all of our classes with grounding activities, just to take a moment to breathe. You can do 1 moment of breath for yourself a day, at least.
Great. Hello and good afternoon. What a great question. We get to ask that all the time, don't we? And I think in our authentic self, I would like to do more self-care, but I would say it's taken a long time. This year, I'm finally going to the gym. I'm finally eating lunch, maybe 3 days out of the week, right? Sit down and eat some lunch during the school day. But I take moments here and there, even if it's just shutting the door for a minute and taking a deep breath, screaming into a pillow, whatever that is, right, to get yourself back on track. But I would say being in this space today also is grounding for me. To know that you all picked a Saturday to come and share space together really reminds me of just how powerful we can be as a community. But really, every year I have a mantra that I try to think of and then keep myself focused throughout the year. This year it's be the light. And all these affirmations and things that we tell our students and our staff and everyone to do, I'm just trying to practice for myself. You have to lead, right, with that and practice what you preach. So I have that mantra, and every day I will wake up and remind myself why I'm waking up in the morning, remind myself that I want to show up and share space with others. So those are some of the things that I do. I have my family and friends are really, really important to me. This year I also have decided at least one of the days on the weekend is going to be just my day to enjoy and be present and spend time with family. I have a small group of empowering women that I really like to hang out with and do vision boarding every year. So those are the little things that I remind myself, give myself permission to do without any guilt.
Thank you so much, Phung. Good afternoon, everybody. It's such an honor to be here. Huge fan of Gateway and the work they're doing. So to have the opportunity to come convene with such a powerful group of educators is truly, truly a humbling honor. Like my colleagues, I think I misinterpreted this question. I have notes on my phone here, and it's all about really how I ground myself in the work that I do. So clearly misread that one. But I think that in thinking about how I ground myself to kind of find the balance and the joy needed to keep going and keep the energy level where it needs to be to do the work in year 23 as an educator, It's really no different than what I tried to do when I was a teacher, which is, you have a to-do list that can truly never end. And when the time comes to disconnect, like, you got to be okay with that. For me, what it means now as a partner and a father is like, I'm gonna make the commitment to do the things that matter to my family. I coach my sons, I have 2 sons, they're 8 and 4, so they're at a critical age where dad is very much super important in their world, and vice versa for me. And so I coach their baseball teams, I coach flag football. If that means like my calendar has to end on Monday at 4, that's what it means. And maybe it means that after they go to sleep, I have some extra emailing and late hours to do the work, which might lead to a little less sleep. But if it helps me find the balance and the love in my family life, which is needed to keep fueling my energy at work, then ultimately that's what I think it requires, and certainly had an amazing role model in my father to help me understand the balance of what that looks like. In terms of how that actually transfers though into work, I do want to say, like, one of the things that I'm just finding a lot of grounding in this year is the invigoration of the young people, especially the young educators of color at STEP. The hope and the vision that they have for the future of education. And 2 of my students are right here to the left, Hi and Giselle, who are leading a workshop later this afternoon on liberatory practices and affinity-based work for teachers of color. I mean, that to me is grounding and healing. And when I know that the future of young people and families and communities is going to be led by incredible educators like these folks, I can rest easier at night, and I can go to baseball practice and feel fine because I know that our communities and our schools are going to be in good hands. And so I think there's the balance that I'm hoping to strike both in my personal life and at work.
And so it's important, I think, that we started there because, of course, there are challenges that we have to contend with, and you all are contending with in your work, especially as the effects of the pandemic, which is still going, are being felt even more so. I know California wasn't necessarily in these headlines, but I've seen recent headlines about teacher turnover. The impact of that was anticipated as the pandemic was really we were in the heat of it. Some of those residual effects and still attendance at schools, like there's still a lot, and those are just like a couple things, right? There's always, even when the pandemic wasn't happening, there's always a slew of issues, and so it's just compounded a little bit. So I'm wondering if each of you can describe a challenge that you've overcome within your role during this kind of post-pandemic, now that we're kind of getting back into trying to get back to a new normal, during your school year, and how you've leveraged some of those learnings from that challenge to support others. I can keep picking on folks, but if anyone wants to jump in on that one. Roilyn, you want to
I can start.
take that? Okay.
I was forming a thought in my head. I can totally start.
Yeah, I saw that. That's what I was going to go for her.
I think that post-pandemic is actually much more challenging than when we were in the pandemic. One of the things that I find to be incredibly challenging is the place where we sit, where it's like you have to keep going, and also everyone is completely exhausted, right? Life is lifing, right? It is definitely happening to people. People are losing folks. People are grieving. People are caring for loved ones and still showing up every day, and they're showing up like just exhausted. And so I think one of the things that I've done to just navigate like that challenge in particular, because I do feel like if our community can't be present for each other, then who are we present for? I've done a lot of giving people a lot of space. I've done a lot of creating space this year for people to be like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I need to curse right now, I need to throw something, I need to do 10 push-ups, I need to tell you all the things I don't like that you did yesterday. It's really just giving people space and listening to them. Like, what is it that you need? I can't meet this deadline. Fine, don't. Do what you need to do for you. And I think that I have actually had much more success and seen much more growth by honoring. I've always done this, but I think after COVID, it's really challenging because sometimes people don't know what they need, or they don't know what they want in the moment. They know that they're showing up every day, and they don't have very much to give. And so I've really, really encouraged creating space for adults. I've organized a few mental health things for some of our staff. Definitely connecting, especially people who are taking on a lot of trauma, so our counselors, our school psychologists, making sure that they have some time with someone outside of the organization to lift themselves up and to feel whole and to feel healed. So those are some of the things that I've done, and in transition that has turned into creating spaces for students as well. I just think we're all human and we have to center our human experiences first, and if we can do that together, maybe one day you have energy that I don't have. And so I think like being in touch with what's going on with every person in their lives, what they need, and asking is the best way to move forward through this challenging time. Because if I'm being honest, everything is a challenge. Everything is a challenge. You know, driving is a challenge. Everything is a challenge. Traffic is crazy now. I mean, it's crazy before, but it's crazier now. But it's like, I'm like, where do all these extra people come from? But
I have the same every day.
I thought everybody was moving to Texas.
People?
What's happening?
Why?
But it's, you know, it's just, it's giving people space, honoring the human, giving people space, and knowing that I don't have answers. We got to figure all this out together, and I need you to be whole and healthy to do that. Oh, are we passing it?
Yeah, no, we can do the line that way since Laticia went first last time.
Go Phung.
Yes. I would say this year, it has been a challenge and also a blessing, because the community that I serve and the school that I'm at, they've always faced food insecurity, housing insecurity, a lot of violence, a lot of challenges that I think we all are facing now. And I think just on a national level, we feel seen and understood. And if anything, it's magnified some of those challenges. But ultimately, I think it's allowed me and our school and our staff, especially me as leading that, to just be more forgiving and to say, relax. I think that's the biggest thing. All my staff and students will be like, you gotta relax. And so I will say that the challenge for me this year has been to just balance that out, that there are things that need to get done. We have our unending list of things to do. And it's okay to just say, you know what, that isn't going to get done today, and that's okay. But what do we need to focus on? Let's take a step back. Let's create space. I think staff professional development, all these things that we have to do to make all the things work, and the things that we're looking forward to. I think it's okay to just say, hey, we're not going to do that today. Let's just spend 45 minutes checking in. Like, how are you really doing today? And as much as I want our staff and our teachers, we call them coaches at my school, to see students and to make time for them and to connect with them and build relationships with them, we have to do the same with each other. And I will say that's one thing, again, the challenge is to say it is okay to make that time, because we are human. We're all dealing with the same things. And my adult staff, there are things that they're dealing with: food insecurity, housing insecurity, right? And so we talk a lot about reinvesting in our communities. And I have a lot of alumni at my school, and so they are also staff at my school. And so some of the challenges that they face, like, I have to make time for that, and to make sure that they're healing as well. And so I think, again, just taking the time to say it's okay, have a lot of forgiveness, a lot of compassion, and as much as we want to work hard every day, we also have to spend time to just share and talk about the things that aren't going well for us, and to be real and authentic and human, and know that you're not alone in it.
Yeah, so I think, as Ariana mentioned, the teacher turnover zone that we're sitting in is a very real one at the moment. And I think that's why I see my work at the moment at the Stanford Teacher Education Program to prepare the next generation of educators as particularly critical, given the times that we've lived through these last 5 years. And I think it presents us with an enormous challenge in that so many folks are thinking at the moment, like, why go into teaching, right? I'm gonna be overworked, underpaid, which has historically and long been the narrative. But every other job, almost in every other sector, allows one to work from home or have a remote or hybrid schedule, right? That's not what teaching does. The work is in schools, the work is with young people. So when we do get a group of 43 incredibly talented and diverse young educators who aspire and have vision to become teachers, how do we create the balance, the well-being, the health to navigate an incredibly rigorous 11-month program at Stanford, which we know is not an institution that was built to meet the needs of BIPOC folks, to thrive? Because if you can't find that balance in your training year as a teacher, and find habits, both personal and professional, to sustain yourself and really strike that healthy balance, what's the probability that you're going to find it in your early years, first, second, third year of being a teacher? Probably not super high. Now, I'm saying all this to say I haven't found the answer to this yet. I want you to know we're working through this every day at STEP. One micro example is, so we are in a really busy stretch of the winter quarter. Our students are definitely feeling the load of teaching every day in the morning and coming to coursework in the afternoon at Stanford. I teach a class with 3 other educators on assessment for learning and equity. There's a lot of content to work through, tons of work on how to assess, grade for equity, et cetera. But feeling where our students were this past Wednesday, we said, you know what, we're gonna hit pause. We're gonna open class with like a 40-minute community circle, and we're gonna hold space. We're gonna breathe, we're gonna check in, we're gonna express gratitude and appreciation for those who have shown up to help us get to this point at the winter quarter at Stanford. And it's okay that 1 hour of our class may not be assessment content related. And that's really important. Why is that important? 1, I think our students needed it. 2, it's modeling how we as educators can go into educational spaces and not feel like the pressure that all 140 minutes of this instructional block has to be super content driven if our students are not okay, right? Because what's that? How are they going to learn what we're teaching if they're not okay? And I felt recently that many of our students were not okay. And so modeling those abolitionist rituals and routines that really humanize ourselves in the work, right? We're thinking a lot at STEP about how do we truly honor the authentic vibrancy of who we each are as teachers and bring that in its full beauty to the forefront of a classroom. And that, our argument is that when you do that, not only are kids gonna see you more for who you are, but they're gonna humanize themselves more in your space. And ultimately the goal will be that the learning becomes that much more powerful. Have we got there yet? I don't think so, but as we look to admit the most diverse class in the history at STEP, which is 82% BIPOC, over half first-gen college graduates, which is amazing for an institution like Stanford for sure, this is going to be an ever more important issue and something that we're deeply invested in continuing to puzzle through to find the right balance, because I really do believe that if you can find it in your year as an in-service teacher, the likelihood that you can find it in the profession and ultimately sustain yourself for a long time in education is far more likely.
And that, just flagging, it was just a little aha of hearing you talk about, because I think about breakfast programs and I talk about how can you learn if you have an empty stomach, but then I feel like we're in a space now where it's also the emotional, there needs to be some emotional food and feeding in order to be able to process. That's just kind of that's the space that we're in right now. Yeah. Laticia.
I think there's going to be a common theme of humanizing ourselves and humanizing the people that we serve. I think the biggest challenge for me, so I have been in SFUSD for 22 years. 16 of those years was in family partnerships. So that was all about being with the people. And then I moved into central office in 2016, still to do family partnership work, but at the central level, right? Up as African American Parent Advisory Council Program Manager, but I was still with the people. And in July, I became the interim director of my department. And that was post the pandemic, right? And we get all this data back, and the data is Black children, as historically, are not doing well. Right? Black children are failing. Black children are underperforming. Look at the math results for Black children. And it was like, all of a sudden, I went from understanding the circumstances and understanding the plight and understanding the conditions to gotta get these numbers up, and it took me off of who I am as a person and who I am as a leader in my community and a leader in this district. And Marisha, who's sitting here, she's on my team as well, and she's now the APAC program manager, but she'll tell you, I came in hard, what we doing? And it was like, right? And so I'm new to the position. My team, I have a lot of new team members, and we all went through a pandemic. We all were trying to figure this out. And I have the pleasure of serving Black students, my focus is Black students. And my team, with the exception of one gentleman who is Filipino, is a Black team. So we're feeling this in a different way, but then I'm throwing this pressure on them, right? Get these numbers up, what are we doing? And forgetting to humanize ourselves and humanize the work. And so one of the things that we did was Laticia, calm down, remember, I had to calm down a little bit, but nothing will humble you like being with your people. Right? And people reminding you there's so much, this story is so much bigger than this. And so anyway, we started talking to the young people. We're talking to our teachers. We're asking them what's your experience in this district? What keeps you from being here? And then we had to reframe our brains to start to think about achievement on whose terms. Right? And so I understand that data drives a lot, it drives funding, it drives whatever, but what we were doing was internalizing that we are failing. And I say we, meaning Black folks. We're internalizing that we can't serve our students as educators, that our children, what do they hear when we keep saying you are underperforming? You are the lowest performing. And I started to internalize that. And I had to shift it for myself. And then I had to be bold and shift it for people in the public who are saying, community organizations are saying, what are you all doing? The Black kids are failing. Are they? On your data sets, maybe it doesn't look like it, but have you spent some time in our classrooms? Have you sat and read with a Black child? Have you had an opportunity to just be in space and see the brilliance and the creativity and how capable our kids were? And so that's what we had to do as a team. And it's what I have been trying to shift other people in our district and in our community to start thinking about, and how do we humanize our young people? They're not robots. They have real stories, real conditions, real things that brought them, but it's also what's happening in our schools that prevent them from being their best self is real. And I think we forget that. We're like, oh, well, they aren't reading, but yet we haven't trained our teachers to be reading teachers, to be reading specialists. There's no professional development. Because we have had such a staffing shortage, we have not held professional development. But then we're saying our children are underperforming. No, I think maybe our adults are. And I'm not putting blame on any educator because the conditions aren't set up for you to do what you need to do. We're not giving you the professional development that you're asking for or that you so desperately need. And so I think that's one. And then really thinking about what are the other gifts that our kids bring that are also academic in nature, and how do we uplift that? And so I have been on my bullhorn yelling, remember who these children are. Remember their gifts. Black children are brilliant, and you will never tell me anything else. And if I can keep saying that, then we start as adults saying, not they're underperforming, but what do I need to do to shift my practice to make sure that brilliance is shining? What do I need to do? Because if I keep telling you, because right now what we all have in our head is the deficit. And if I can shift that deficit and just keep saying they are brilliant, they are capable, if the conditions are right for our children to survive, they will do it and they will thrive. Then you will start to believe it too. Our children will start to believe it and they will be their best selves. And so that's the challenge. I'm still trying to get there. And then thinking about my team and making sure that I don't push them into places that they don't need to be. Instead, they need to be champions of our young people. They need to listen to our young people, and we need to respond to our young people as the experts in the space. And if we can respond to them and see them as experts, then maybe our practices will produce the outcomes that we want to see.
And that was a perfect transition, I think, because you're starting to answer some of the next question, which is what does it mean to you to create space for yourself and your professional environment, and also for the students and people you serve. So I know you started touching on some of that, Laticia, and we can come back around too, but Phung, I'm curious how you would answer that question. And then if it's related to, I noticed earlier when you said that at your school you call your teachers coaches. And I'm wondering, I thought that was interesting, just what went into how that kind of terminology shifted and what that signifies at your school.
Creating space is making space for anybody, for everybody. And it's not about I think there's certain spaces that have always been around, and we just have to create the space that we need and want in our community and for our schools. And so it means that everybody does have a voice, right? And that they should be seen and heard. We include our students in everything we do, including the hiring of our teachers and our staff. I have a youth rep on our board. So our school was initially founded by young people. And so that's always been the core and the heart of our work. And still over 23 years, that still is our vision and our mission, and we still actively do that. Young people are powerful. They're amazing, resilient. We serve 97% students of color. And so to redefine and reshape that and that belief is really important. And so when young people walk through the doors, we see them, we acknowledge them. And a lot of our students still feel like they've never been told that they could. And so to really make sure that that is how we lead and how we create that space is very important. We call our teachers coaches because that is what they are. You're not just someone in front of the classroom teaching a subject, and it's not just about, unfortunately, it's not just about content knowledge. It really is about making things connected and relevant and meaningful. And so like a coach on a sport, so I think Jeff would know this, when you coach young people, you have to see their strengths. So it's never about what they can't do, but students shine, people shine in so many different ways. And so to be able to create spaces where young people can thrive in their own authentic self is very, very important. So as a coach, that is your job, right? Not everyone is going to be a point guard, right? And there will be some people who might play more minutes than others, but when you create space and also allow and train and coach a young person in the classroom, it's the same thing. So we're not trying to look for, create all our young people to be point guards, but everyone has something to contribute. And so, creating space could also mean, again, with my teachers, I really feel like every single one of them have a strength and an important thing to contribute to our school. I do work at a very small school, so we have time for all of us to meaningfully check in, meaningfully contribute ideas. I've been able to also cultivate our staff to kind of build and grow in their positions. And so it really is our community. And so making sure that the spaces that we have allow for that and allow for folks to be empowered. And I feel inspired every day by all my students and all my staff. Every day I think I learn more from them than they do from me. And then I think spaces like this is super important as well.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I love that, Phung. I think when I think of making space for others, I think of how do we ensure that every single person we have the gift to work with feels seen, honored, and affirmed. And one micro practice that I've definitely enjoyed implementing at STEP with the privilege that I have to lead an educational space, to teach classes at Stanford, is to give that space to our students in the form of what we call a cultural share. Dr. Bettina Love in her We Want to Do More Than Survive book argues that there's such a thing called the teacher education gap. And she refers to this idea that we always ask teachers in education to become culturally sustaining or culturally relevant practitioners. But you can't do that if you haven't made intentional space to study culture and embrace culture and be on a constant kind of never-ending pursuit to learn more about culture and the identity of other folks. And we have such a diverse, amazing group of teachers at STEP that when you give them the floor to share about their own culture and their own identities, not only is it an honoring and affirming space for them to bring their full selves to, the community of 43 other teacher preparing teachers, but there's an opportunity there for us to learn about culture. And so for the example, the other day I had an amazing experience myself where I learned so much from Haya, who led a phenomenal workshop of really a cultural share for our community on the history of the hijab and how to kind of disrupt Islamophobia and other manifestations of Islamophobia in high school settings for students who might be hijab-wearing women, young women in the high school setting, right? That was incredibly powerful, and it, I hope, honored her and made her feel seen, but it also was an opportunity for us as educators to embrace culture and embrace something that maybe we don't know a lot about, so that when we go out to serve in diverse communities, we're better equipped to, one, be culturally sustaining practitioners, but also to disrupt various forms of discrimination, phobias, racism when we see it. So that's one practice that I feel has like helped make space for others, and something that we're feeling pretty good about at STEP.
Laticia, I know you were saying saying some things in the space that you're making, but yeah, is there anything else you want to add on to where you'd started going?
I think it's the idea of professional development for us, and like we're all learners and we forget that, right? That we also need to keep learning. And when we get in, the higher you get in positions, the less opportunities you have for that. So the one way that I'm creating that space for myself is I'm like, I need a coach. I deserve a coach. Everyone needs that, right? Because I want to be the best leader that I can be, and I don't know it all. I might present like I do, but I don't. And my team deserves the same thing. So I want them to be the greatest that they can be in all ways, right? So whether it's content knowledge or self-life coaching, I think that, I'm gonna keep picking on Marisha just because she's here. I invited her to it was like a women's something where we were just like talking about ourselves and who we are. And she said I set her up, right? She was like, you set me up because we had to talk about feelings, right? And I like feelings, she doesn't. And so, but that was an opportunity to build her as well. And though whether it was a setup or not, like where are the spaces for you to learn? I have some gentlemen on my team who one person came out of reentry work. He's never worked in education. So he's coming from a whole different spectrum of this work where he was helping the babies because we had failed them and how to help them out. And he's like, I get to start brand new, but yet he doesn't understand the context of the school system. So what do we need to make sure that he is sustained, that he feels full so that he can stay? And so it's finding the right professional development for him that may look different than what I have to give from Marisha or what I offer, because I don't have anything to give, I can offer it. And so that's a huge way. And then I will just say the last thing, we have a young lady on our team, young firecracker. She is going to be incredible, but also doesn't come from the world of education. And she was hired as an admin assistant, but yet she's going to transform things with her young mind. And a mind that she thought, oh, I'm just gonna come in here and do admin work, and now she's starting to see herself as an educational leader. And how do we foster that? Because we could easily relegate people to like little boxes, but how do we like give her everything and immerse her in all the things that we're doing so that she can figure out where her niche is and where she can grow? And so giving professional development is huge, or offering it to myself and to those that I work with, and our families as well. So how are we making sure our families get dual capacity training as well so that they can sit at the same table as us and we can recognize them as partners and they know the same language and they can, contribute in the way that works for them?
For me, I would say, this is a hard question. For me, I would say creating space for myself at work is challenging. There are so many other people who need your time and attention, and in my role, I work with the students who are the most vulnerable. I have some heavy situations that I deal with every day that are hard for me to process, let alone that are hard for the families and the educators and the administrators and all of those folks to process as well. So I show up to create space for them during work. I find space for myself outside of that time. So I do have a coach because I do feel like I have to continue to grow, and I have to have someone who can, my team definitely loves to give me feedback. They give me lots of feedback. That's fine. I'm open to feedback always. I think they're a little giving me too much feedback, but anyway. But I think one of the ways that I do it for myself is through these other channels. I am sure that I am staying connected with BIPOC organizations so that I can also talk about some of the challenges that I'm having, some of the things that I have to navigate as a Black woman in special education, which is really like finding, the rarest thing you can find in like a huge pile of something. So I think like it's challenging. I see myself showing up for myself during the workday by just being available for other people. And then I would say I create space for other people by when I do check-ins, I always have what I call social pause. So it's a moment, we don't have to talk about work. We can talk about everything. Like I have a teacher, he loves ramen noodles, and that's what we talk about. We talk about, because I love them too, so we talk about different seasonings and different spices, and then the kids come in and we talk about it too. So it's just, for me, it's giving them simple 10 minutes. How's your dog? Can he sit yet? You had him for a while and he still can't sit. Like, what's happening? So I think like creating space in that way, but also like this idea, I'm reminded of this thing that Issa Rae said a long time ago. She was like, you know, people always want to network up, but you should really network across, right? And so one of the things that I find to be incredibly helpful is giving people space. We have many different schools. Talk to each other. Nobody ever puts teachers in a room or educators in a room. It's like, just talk. Find somebody you haven't, just listen to someone. So in every professional development that I give, I create that space as well. Like, just check in with somebody, you know, have a moment, go for a walk. And I think I'm also looking to create spaces in systems and structures. One of the big things for me is I work with a lot of families, and a lot of times families come in, they've been told this is our policy, this is the way things work, this is what happens, this is the way the IEP goes, and they're just like, I just want someone to listen to me. Like, my child ran away last night, someone is missing, this happened in my family. I don't care that your IEP is due today. And you have to be able to say, like, I let that go. If I have a family and I can tell that they don't understand what's happening, or they have something they want to share, they're uncomfortable, then we're not moving forward. I don't care, like, yeah, I'm gonna get dinged by the state, all right. But like, it's more valuable for me, for you to actually be a real member of this team. You know more about your kid than all of us. We don't have the right to sit here and tell you about your kid. What is it that you want us to do? How can we help you? And so I think that that's one of the things that I do. I try to make sure when I'm having IEP meetings with families that they understand. We bring food. It's like we have activities for other siblings, because I want you to stay as long as you possibly can. You want help with this? That's fine. We'll go downstairs, we'll get a laptop, we'll do this together. And so I think for me, what's most important is I want not only your voice to be heard, but I want your voice to be represented in the work, right? You said this thing, it was brilliant. What system how can we shift this system to make space for that? Right? Like, we learn from people's experiences, and it's not just educators. We learn from families, right? A small, simple thing, one of the biggest differences that I noticed in going from the East Coast to the West Coast is here, everybody goes by first names. But there are families that are incredibly uncomfortable with that. And they're not saying anything because they haven't been given a voice. So some of the professional development that I've done with my team is just like, listen, make space. They don't need you to tell them who their kid is. They know. They know. Even if they say they don't, they know. Right? So just give people a voice, not just to be heard, but also for their feedback to be implemented, and for you to be able to say, this is what we did as a result of this conversation. Right? And so I think that those are kind of some of the ways that I think through making space for just all of the different stakeholders, and myself as well.
Thank you for reminding, if it's okay that I can add to this, this is reminding me that when you create space, it's not just about my space and it's not about your space, it's our space together, right? So making time to do that, and making time to not just always asking for what people can give, but what do you need? Yes. And so what we do every year too is we create agreements on how we want to be together. And there's something called the Design Team Alliance, where we talk about how we want to show up and what it means to show up, but also how it impacts other people. And so it's really creating this open line of communication, and again, space on how we are when we're together, and what is it that we're trying to create together. And that's the ultimate bottom line, and not coming in and it's not just any one person's space. And so reminding ourselves and giving us time, even 10 minutes before we start our agenda. It's like, what do you need to land in the space? What is going on for you? You know, how are you feeling? You'll get way more done when you do that, and when you allow someone to just say, hey, I'm just coming into this, and these are the 10 things that just happened, and in order for me to focus or to be present, I just needed to share this. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to spend the next 45 minutes on it, but giving just that brief moment of time to acknowledge and say, I see you, thank you for being here, and let's be in this space together for whatever the reason is.
Thanks for adding that. So I actually want to open it up for questions. I'm going to have a closing question for everybody in terms of kind of parting encouragement, advice words. So have that in the back of your mind as we're doing this. But before we kind of close on that note, I'd love to open it up and see if there are questions in the audience. And yeah, hear if you have any or experiences that resonate or you want to share. Anyone? Not yet? Because I can keep asking. Oh, there we go.
Hello, everybody. So I take professional development really serious. I taught for 10 years, and I probably remember 5 of the PDs, 3 of them because they were so bad. So I think PD is not given a lot of respect in education. What do you believe or feel we need to do to make professional development taken more serious, or maybe you're already doing things around that? But I think, as an organizational leader, we come in and offer professional development. Sometimes it's like, oh, we already have somebody doing that. And deep down, I don't think it is, but it's also a question of like, how do we encourage, if there's no budget for it, if they don't put money aside for it, then you're only gonna have the second-year teacher doing the PD for the 15-year teachers, right? And you know how well that goes sometimes, right? So, like, what are your thoughts about how we need to shift the narrative, PD being so important and valuable I heard a lot of you speak about PD, so I'm just curious about that.
I'll just
Yeah,
jump in
jump in,
quickly. So we spent some time with our Stanford research partners really looking at our educators and hearing from our educators. And among all the things about retention, what would it take to get you to stay? They didn't say money. They didn't say, I don't know, safety. They said they want to perfect their craft, amongst other things, right? They want to feel safe. When I say safety, I didn't mean like physical safety. They did say they need affinity, but they also wanted to perfect their craft and be really good at what they're doing. And so I'd say go back to the people who are saying it. What does professional development look like for you? What do you need? And let's be responsive to what they say that they need. The other thing that came out of the research study was the idea of affinity mixed with PD, right? So like we want affinity spaces. We don't want just affinity spaces where we're sharing feelings, and that's cool too. We want that. We want to feel safe with our people, but we also want to do professional development in affinity, because I want to learn from you, someone who I feel a little different connection to. And so how do we uplift doing both, right? Meeting the needs, your human needs, in the same space where you feel like you can learn from colleagues where they're, and we were talking racial affinity, but I think affinity shows up in so many different ways. Yeah. And so thinking about cohorting people according to where they feel safe to do that professional development.
Yeah, you want to go?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. For me, I think that's a really good question, right? And it's like I could literally, I'm gonna find you after because I got a lot of stuff to say. But okay, it's interesting because as starting out as a special education teacher, I've never had professional development designed towards me. I've never had anything I've never had a coach. I've never had anything. And so when I became in charge of professional development for special educators, I really, really wanted to be something that was impactful and powerful. And the only way I knew how to do that, going back to what you said, was to ask them. So we develop our scope and sequence for professional development together. We have a team, I do consistent feedback surveys. People can literally stop me in the moment and be like, this is not helpful. I'm quick on my feet, so we shift, and this isn't the answer to all of your questions, but PD is a big thing. I have found, and I'm not trying to be rude, but educators are really hard to teach. It's really hard. It's literally like a mini classroom. People are on their phone, people are doing a million things, and that's fine, but it's for me, the biggest thing is engagement. I want people to be excited to come to see me, right? Like when people come into PD, I'm playing jazz hip hop. When people, so like a part of it is getting people there and wanting to be there, and just, for me, the biggest thing is I would do that again. Great, I won. Okay, like it's a win, it's a win. And I think that you have to develop professional development with the people who want to be developed, with the people who want to perfect their craft. I'm not on the front lines in the classroom, right? I can't speak to what is needed. I can hypothesize, I can look at the data, but again, data doesn't give you a complete picture. And so one of the big things that I would encourage about PD is, one, to do that with the people. If you have a system where you can navigate that, create that scope and sequence together. Don't dismiss the data, of course, use the data, but don't use that as the whole picture. And another thing that I think that I do, professional development over the years has really been centered in, at least from my experience, a lot of whiteness. And so I think for me personally, the communities that I serve, there's a disconnect between kind of just like what really needs to happen. And so one of the things that I also do during professional development is ensure that we are elevating BIPOC voices. I'm making sure that and that's really hard to do in special education, but I'm making sure that some of the people that are presenting, people who are coming, texts that we're reading, and I do believe in differentiated and inclusive PD, so text, media, podcast, all that anyway. I'm making sure that those are Black and brown voices. I'm making sure that they're people of color. I'm making sure that we have queer folks represented. I'm making sure that everything is covering, that I'm covering everything, because there is a lot of brilliance, there is a lot of experience that comes from that community as well, and a lot of educators don't have an opportunity to see it. And so that alone helps folks want to be more engaged and helps people want to interact with their students in a different way. And so I think we have a challenging questions that you've asked, and I do not have an answer, but that's how I kind of sorta answered your question a little bit.
Well, just like the classroom, our adults want to also see people, right, that look like them and that can relate to them and that can connect with them. So I would say that's an important aspect. Another thing is I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I think I've heard that amongst the panelists today too. And I think that's the important thing, is to know that I don't know everything. We don't all know everything, so it's important to continue to evolve and grow. One of the things that I'll say to anyone who chooses to come work at our school, is that you have to be willing to learn and grow. And during your time here, that is important. So we don't all know everything, and so to be able to provide those spaces is important. And then it's not just about what you learn in professional development spaces; it's about how you practice it. So I think what we have to remember is we have to provide spaces for folks to practice what they're learning and to give some timely feedback and to do coaching and to help develop them in their practice. And so in stressing that professional development is about growing us, but it's because it will impact who we're serving, which is our students and our families. And so always keeping them at the core of why we are doing the work that we're doing for ourselves is because it will make an impact for our students.
Jeff, did you?
Yeah, I agree with everything that has been shared here. I think that pretty much everything we do at STEP, although it's academic in nature, is basically professional development for first-year teachers, right? We're basically coaching and teaching teachers how to teach in their most formative stages. So the first thing I did when thinking about our special education course was hire Roilyn to teach and lead that space. That y'all can see why that was a wise move. But I think that, just to relift some of these themes up, we're doing, I think that our students are getting so much out of a space that is an affinity-based space at STEP that focuses on abolitionist and liberatory practices for teachers of color, and it's led by 2 doctoral students who are both of color, both from communities that have been marginalized historically, and it's giving our students life. I think the problem, Ashanti, is that the folks who are making decisions to drive, PD in big districts, sadly, their number one focus is the dashboard, which comes back to this notion of achievement. And when we hear over and over again that our black and brown babies are underperforming or they're low, like all these things that manifest when we're doing kind of, and I'm not saying that like we don't ultimately want to get our students to a place where they are achieving to their peers of other racial groups. Of course, that's the goal. But I think that when that narrative gets played over and over again, it's spirit murdering to teachers that have been in the profession for a long time, have seen this over and over again, and it doesn't give you life. So what is the professional development that ultimately is spirit feeding, right? That nurtures the spirit, that nurtures the soul, that gives us invigoration, and that ultimately helps us find the drive to keep going, right? And I think that is PD that's more rooted in cultural work, identity work. Even if we're doing, pedagogical, curricular work, how can we approach that through an intersectional lens of culture and identity? I think it has to come back to culture and identity, I'm very optimistic that the future educators will continue to push this in the direction it needs to head, because they are incredibly justice oriented. I think they're demanding certain things that folks of my generation might have asked a bit more kindly. But I appreciate that from them because I think that that's what's needed now. And so I'm encouraged that the educational landscape, including professional development, is going to shift in the decades ahead.
Thank you for that question. We probably have time to squeeze in one more if anybody else has. Yes, right there.
For the change, as long-term educators, have you had to create friction for that change? Has it always been a peaceful in terms of creating something new or starting an organization? Or within that, how do you create friction, or how have you experienced friction from maybe perhaps younger, as in steps, so from younger folks as well, doing that for change? If that makes sense. It's like, it sounds very peaceful when you're talking, but as a teacher, we've had to agitate, or I had to agitate.
Yep.
What are moments of time when you had to agitate? And how have you been agitated as well to change in your roles?
Okay, moments, I'll just repeat this on the mic. Moments where, you've needed to agitate for change, or where you've kind of gone in and intentionally kind of caused some friction because that's what was necessary to move the needle. Is that right? Yeah.
I'm a professional agitator. That's all I do. Like, I know my job is sick of me. Like, that's literally all I do. So it's like, especially with the community that I serve, right? Like, it's easy to be like, oh, this kid just can't get this. His family just doesn't understand, blah, 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 blah. So the number one thing that I think when I'm in that space, for me, I have a saying, like, the quicker we rumble, the faster we recover. Let's get this over with so we can get it on and moving. Like, for me, I'm not intimidated. I don't know, like, it doesn't bother me. Is it easy? No, it's not easy. And it does come with a lot of challenges. And you really have to, like, I've probably done things that I should not say today. So it's one of those things where you have to, I'm doing this or I'm not. And with that comes a lot. People are gonna be upset. Maybe you didn't think about this person. There's lots of consequences that you're aware of, and there's lots of unintended consequences that you didn't consider. So that is why it is important to have allies. Like, that is why it's important to have people who are in your disruptor community who, when you are like, all right, I said this is coming at me, the people are coming at me like this, because that will happen. There will come a time when people are putting the pressure on you because they want to silence you, or they feel like your voice is going to cause a disruption in this nice traditional structure that we have, right? And my thing is just stay ready so you don't have to get ready. I'm being honest, and so, like, it's not easy. But when you do it, you have to plant your 2 feet. I don't know sports, but I'm about to do a sports analogy. You have to, in basketball, you plant your feet and they look like this, and they're ready to just take the pressure and just take the hit. Charge. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Exactly. And so that's essentially what you have to do. You have to plant your feet, make sure you have your team behind you and next to you, and you just gotta go. It's not easy. Just go. I'll find you after too, don't worry.
Anybody else want to put an exclamation point on that before
More
we?
time at Roilyn is what I'm ready. That's my big takeaway from the panel today. I mean, I couldn't agree more that when you are agitating or resisting, we teach our teachers this all the time. Like, you have to find community to do that work with. It's too burdensome and overwhelming for like a first, second year teacher to try to like take on the weight of the system on their own. You have to find community. Otherwise it doesn't become sustainable to resist and agitate. I think it's also important to know that like that tension and that friction, the moments where we're sitting in that, like on the other side of that, are the most beautiful opportunities for change and hope that can come about. I mean, that's been the case in my career. Like the toughest moments, the moments of friction, the moments where I felt like I was being pushed to compromise my own integrity, but I resisted. Those were the moments where on the other side, like I found the most fruitful pastures of change. And I think STEP is one of those places. Like I think those in the room who have been through STEP would agree, like STEP has long had an amazing history of producing incredible teachers, but it has also been a very challenging and even harmful place for people of color historically. I'm just gonna name that because at times it was for me. And I think that we still have a lot of work to do to change that narrative, but I think that we are moving in the right direction. And that would not have happened if it wasn't for resistance and agitation that came long before me. I want to acknowledge I didn't have to do a lot of that very hard labor, but I think that the moments where that hard labor occurs on the backside creates such opportunities for hope. And that's the moment that we're sitting in now. I feel like the door of racial justice at institutions is wider than it's ever been in my lifetime. And I think it is dependent upon younger educators who are entering the profession now to just kick that door open even wider and wider, and let's not lose the momentum that we've gained in the last 3, 4, or 5 years in our societies and our communities, because we need that door to be open wider than it even is now.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect transition to going into this kind of last kind of parting words thing, because I feel like on the meta level, we're in like as a society, we're at a friction point, right? We're facing book bannings and just a whole resistance to progress and change, right? And so, but on the other side, there's like if we can really get to the other side of that, there's something really beautiful waiting, a more open society. But yeah, we're in the friction. on big levels and local levels.
Can I add one thing really quickly? Yeah. Make sure you have an actionable ally, not somebody that reads a lot, okay? Like, unless, I'm just saying, like, there's a difference, okay? Like, I get that you can read, but make sure you have somebody that's ready to perform when it's time, not quote a book. Okay. Yeah, yeah.
I read Ibram X. Kendi. It's like, okay. And yes, got it. So let's close now with what advice each of you would offer to a new educator coming into the field at this particular time, or for a mid-career educator as well, or either or. You could pick one, if just kind of wherever you feel like your piece of advice that you would want to pass on would resonate. Laticia, I'll start with you and we'll go down the line.
I'm not going to be a good student because I'm going to answer the last question and then I'm going to do this one. So my friends have a name for me and I won't tell you exactly what they say, but I'm the field trip friend, right? And so I drive the bus. I'm that bus driver that's like, get on. And so that's how I agitate, right? I'm always stirring up stuff and always like pushing and doing it. And sometimes folks feel a little put off by it, but for the most part, I'm going to make you believe in what I'm talking about. And so I'm going to put you on my bus. I'm going to pick you up, and so that you are also a champion for what we're championing. If I can make it, and so this is going to go to what my parting words is that, so how do you push it, but also help people to figure out their place in your shift, right? Or in what you're trying to fight for, whatever this inequity is that you're trying to solve for. Like, how do I bring you along and then elevate your voice and your expertise and what you have so you feel like, yeah, I'm on the bus with her and we're all on the field trip. So what I would close with, there's a quote, and I use this all the time. There's a quote by Ralph Ellison that says, if you can show me how I can cling to that which is real to me while teaching me a way into a larger society, then I will not only drop my defenses and my hostility, but I will sing your praises and help you to make the desert bear fruit. So what I encourage new educators, old educators, or veteran educators is make it make sense. My kid I have a 23-year-old and an 18-year-old. The 23-year-old she's a sassy little thing, would be like, I'd say something and she didn't understand it, make it make sense. And I got a lot of those, I just want you to know. And so it made me think, how do I make this make sense to you? How do I make it real to you? Because if I can make it real to you while also trying to achieve the goal for me, right? We want greater outcomes for our students. We want we're educational institutions. We should always be focused on that, too, on making sure our kids can thrive once they leave us. But how do I make education real to you? How do I bring in your voice and model what I'm doing based on what you told me what was important? And if we can do that, we can make it make sense, we can teach them what we need to teach them, they will absolutely drop all of those defenses. So will your peers. So will all of the systems that are trying to fight against you, and we will make the desert bear fruit.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I'm just going to say, preserve your power and protect your peace. That has probably been my personal mantra for 2 years, and I have not, well, probably for longer, but I've just begun to understand what that means. And it can mean something different for you than what it means for me, but what's most important is that as long as you can do that, you'll be able to sustain yourself in this work.
Right. I would say to lead with love, and to stay fierce. Having faith over fear, that's been my mantra. A lot of times, I think as educators, as leaders, there's always this fear, right? And this, you're gonna let that happen? Or wait, what are you gonna do about that? And for a while, I say more yeses than I do no, because I think it's important to empower people and to, you had mentioned it earlier, to affirm people in their role and what they do. And when, in the role that I'm in, I take a lot of responsibility in, and I feel like it is my role to advocate as well. And so back to the question that was asked earlier about the agitation and how do you confront some of these challenges, is that we're a team. I do this work because it's always been an us versus them, but it isn't. It really should be we are in it together. And if we can be transparent, if I can be transparent in whatever it is we're doing and what it means, then I think everyone can make a more informed decision together. It's not just about my agenda, it's not your agenda. So if anything, moving forward, just to have faith over fear. There's a lot of uncertainties and unknowns. I think a lot of things that may not be feeling right at this moment, but there's so much hope. And I do think that we're at a crossroad now, and there's so much to look forward to with our future and our young people. And so just to continue to have faith over fear.
I think number one, I recommend to new educators to just humanize yourself into work. Bring your full, vibrant, authentic self to the work every day. And that is one way to ultimately sustain yourself. Two, just center the joy and the brilliance and the creativity of our young people. Yeah, we might not work from home, but we have the greatest job in the world, because we get to work with brilliant, hilarious, funny, energetic, creative young people every day. And that's the most special gift there is. And let's never lose sight of that in the teaching profession, because it's fun and every day is a new and different, invigorating challenge. And that's what makes this profession so beautiful, and we always have to remind ourselves of that for sure. And then I think the third, 3 and 4 would be, number one, just push. Keep pushing, because the opportunity for change is so riper than it's ever been in my 23 years. And the last one is to never lose sight of the importance of dreaming. Because what I've seen in my 23 years in education is I've seen change not happen overnight, but I've definitely seen change occur. I've seen culturally sustaining charter schools pop up. I've seen and had the gift of leading years of suspension-free schooling. These were not things that were even in the discourse when I was myself at STEP, right? So can change occur? Absolutely. But what does it require? It requires dreaming. It requires us to be able to come together collectively and dream about things that we may not even envision or have as direct models today. But if we can collectively dream, I know that the innovation that our communities and our students and our families deserve will eventually occur. So never stop dreaming.
What a perfect note to end on. Thank you all so much for sharing all your experience and your brilliance. And shout out Ashley for, what a panel to put together. This is great. All around, thank you all. And thank you for your questions.